My beloved child, listen closely, because the speed of what is happening may be the very thing that has made you question it. You may have wondered why this person seems so certain, why their thoughts keep moving toward commitment instead of hesitation, why the idea of building a life with you feels less like a distant possibility to them and more like something they have already begun quietly preparing for inside their heart. But what if the reason has very little to do with impatience? What if they are not trying to rush love at all? What if they have simply reached a place where pretending not to know what they feel has become harder than admitting it? There is a difference between moving too quickly and finally becoming clear, and that difference is where this story begins. Your soulmate has been noticing something about you that you may not even realize you reveal. It appears in the way you listen when another person is speaking. It appears in the way you remember small details that everyone else forgets. It appears in the quiet strength you carry when life does not unfold exactly as expected. And slowly, without announcing itself, those details began changing the way this person imagined their future. Don't skip this moment, because the reason they are thinking about marriage is not hidden inside one dramatic event. It is hidden inside several ordinary moments that became extraordinary only after they looked back at them. There was a time when your soulmate believed love would arrive with noise, certainty, and some impossible sign that removed every question. They imagined they would simply know. But when you entered their emotional world, something different happened. Instead of noise, there was recognition. Instead of a perfect explanation, there was a strange calm. Instead of feeling as though they had to perform or prove themselves, they began wondering what it would feel like to simply be known. That is what surprised them. You did not become important because you demanded a place in their future. You became important because, somewhere along the way, imagining the future without you started feeling incomplete. And here is where the deeper realization begins. They did not immediately understand what was happening. At first, they called it attraction. Then they called it curiosity. Later, they told themselves it was simply emotional closeness. But each explanation became too small. One quiet evening, their mind wandered further than they expected. They imagined an ordinary morning beside you. Nothing cinematic. Nothing perfect. Just life. A familiar room. A conversation half finished from the night before. Your presence nearby. And something inside them became still. That ordinary image affected them more deeply than any fantasy ever had. Why? Because they were no longer imagining only how exciting it might be to love you. They were imagining how peaceful it might be to build with you. There is a rare turning point when someone stops asking, "How much do I feel?" and starts asking, "Could I choose this person every day?" Your soulmate has been standing near that turning point, perhaps longer than you know. And heaven, in the spiritual language of this message, is not asking you to believe that everything has already been decided. It is inviting you to notice the meaning behind the shift. Something important is waiting for you here. The desire to marry you did not grow because they suddenly became afraid of losing you. It grew because they started recognizing the kind of relationship they no longer wanted to lose themselves inside. With you, they began seeing the possibility of love that does not require constant guessing. Love that can still be passionate without becoming chaotic. Love that can hold mystery without withholding tenderness. Love where two people can remain themselves and still choose a shared direction. And that realization has changed your soulmate more than they expected. There is one detail they keep returning to. It may sound small, but this is where everything becomes personal. At some point, perhaps during a conversation you hardly remember, they felt safe enough to show you a side of themselves they usually protect. Maybe it was a dream they rarely speak about. Maybe it was an insecurity. Maybe it was an ordinary thought they assumed nobody would understand. They expected to feel exposed afterward. Instead, they felt lighter. You may never have realized how significant that moment became to them. You simply responded as yourself. You did not try to turn it into something bigger. You did not use their vulnerability as leverage. You allowed the moment to remain human. And long after that conversation ended, they kept remembering the way they felt around you. Not impressed. Not overwhelmed. Understood. Stay till the end, because this is where the meaning becomes deeper. People often think someone chooses marriage because they have found a person who gives them constant excitement. But your soulmate is discovering something more lasting. They want a future with you because your presence makes them want to become more honest with themselves. That is a completely different kind of attraction. It does not disappear when the room becomes quiet. It becomes clearer. They have begun asking questions they never expected to ask so soon. What would it be like to build a home with you? How would the two of you handle difficult days? What traditions would become yours? What would laughter sound like years from now when the newness is gone but affection remains? And there is one question that unsettled them in the gentlest possible way. Why does thinking about this person years from now feel more natural than thinking about anyone else tomorrow? They did not have an immediate answer. They may still be trying to understand it. But their emotions began arranging themselves around a truth they could no longer ignore. Their urgency is not only about wanting you. It is about recognizing you. There are people we meet who make us imagine moments, and there are people who make us imagine chapters. Your soulmate has started imagining chapters with you. Something shifted when they realized that the qualities they admired in you were not temporary. Your kindness was not a performance created for their attention. Your independence did not disappear when things became emotional. Your warmth did not require you to abandon your boundaries. You could care deeply and still remain grounded. That combination stayed with them. It challenged something inside their old understanding of love. Perhaps they once believed intensity was proof of depth. Perhaps they confused uncertainty with chemistry. Perhaps they thought relationships had to feel complicated to feel meaningful. But through you, they started seeing another possibility. Maybe the strongest love is not the one that keeps your heart racing because you never know where you stand. Maybe it is the one that allows your heart to rest because honesty is becoming possible. And this is the first reason they want to move toward marriage faster than expected. They are tired of confusing confusion with passion. With you, they are beginning to understand peace. Yet there is another reason, one they may not have fully spoken aloud. It appeared during a moment when you were not trying to impress them at all. You were simply living your life, handling something in your own way, and they watched from a distance emotionally or literally and saw a glimpse of the person you would be when nobody was applauding. Something about that stayed with them. Maybe it was your patience. Maybe the way you cared for someone without expecting recognition. Maybe it was how you handled disappointment without becoming cruel. Maybe it was simply the way you kept moving forward. They realized they were not only attracted to the person you were around them. They respected the person you were when the moment was not about them. Respect changed everything. Attraction may begin a story, but respect makes someone wonder whether the story can survive real life. Your soulmate has begun seeing you through that lens. They do not only want your affection. They value your mind, your character, your way of moving through the world. And once respect entered the picture, the future stopped feeling like a fantasy and started feeling possible. But there is something your soulmate still has not completely understood about their own urgency. This is where the message becomes quiet. Beneath every thought of commitment is a memory of what their life felt like before they recognized this connection. They remember emotional spaces where they had to shrink parts of themselves to keep peace. They remember conversations where they were physically present but never deeply seen. They remember mistaking attention for intimacy. And when they compare those experiences with what they feel beginning around you, they notice the difference. They are not trying to escape the past. They are simply realizing they no longer want to repeat it. You represent a different possibility. Not because you are flawless. Not because they expect a perfect future. But because the connection seems to invite growth instead of pretending growth is unnecessary. There is a strange tenderness in being chosen for reality rather than fantasy. Your soulmate is beginning to imagine loving you through ordinary seasons, through changes, through days when neither of you has perfect words. That is what has made their thoughts about marriage feel unexpectedly serious. They are not only picturing celebrations. They are picturing partnership. There is another layer, though, and this may be the one that explains the feeling of speed more than anything else. Your soulmate has realized that time feels different when something finally feels aligned. Before meeting you or before truly recognizing what you meant, they may have spent years trying to force certainty with people or situations that never quite settled inside them. Then suddenly, with you, important questions began answering themselves. Not every question. Not enough to remove the need for patience, communication, and real-world choices. But enough to awaken courage. That courage feels fast because hesitation had become familiar. Imagine someone standing in front of a door for years, convinced that every door will lead to the same kind of room. Then one day, a door opens and fresh air enters. They may step forward quickly, not because they are careless, but because something has finally shown them there are other possibilities. That is close to what your soulmate is experiencing emotionally. They are not trying to skip the journey. They are beginning to believe the journey could actually have a destination. Don't skip the next realization, because it carries the heart of this message. They have been thinking about the way you make them feel about themselves. Not in the shallow sense of validation. Something subtler. Around you, they sense the possibility of becoming more authentic. They imagine speaking honestly instead of calculating every response. They imagine sharing a dream without immediately protecting it with humor. They imagine being able to say, "This matters to me," and trusting that the sentence will be handled gently. Marriage entered their mind because emotional safety made long-term love imaginable. And once that thought appeared, it did not leave. They tried to treat it casually. They told themselves there was no reason to think so far ahead. Yet their mind returned to the same image, you beside them, not as a temporary chapter, but as a person woven into the structure of their days. Something important is waiting for you in that image. Notice what is missing from it. There is no grand performance. No need to prove anything to the world. What they keep imagining is surprisingly simple: belonging. A place where both of you can exhale. A relationship that is allowed to deepen rather than constantly defend itself. This is why their desire seems sudden from the outside. The decision may feel fast, but the emotional evidence has been gathering quietly. Every conversation. Every small act. Every moment when you remained yourself. Every time they realized they were thinking about you after the moment had already passed. Every time your name appeared in their mind when something beautiful happened and you were the first person they wanted to tell. Those fragments accumulated until they began forming a picture. And now they can see more of the picture than they could before. Yet there is still one missing piece. One reason they have not told you everything they are thinking. It is not because their feelings are weak. In some ways, it is because their feelings have become important enough that they do not want to speak carelessly. They know that saying, "I can imagine marrying you," changes the emotional temperature of a connection. Those words deserve intention. They are trying to understand whether what they feel can become something both of you choose freely, patiently, and honestly. That matters. Because real commitment is not one person racing toward another. It is two people discovering whether their paths can genuinely meet. And somewhere inside your soulmate, the desire to marry you is beginning to mature from a private dream into a question they may eventually have the courage to place gently in front of you. But before that happens, there is something they need to face within themselves. A realization connected to a moment from the past, a moment when they almost convinced themselves that what they felt for you was too much, too soon, too difficult to explain. They tried to step away from the thought. They tried to become practical. And then something happened that made the idea of a future with you return stronger, calmer, and far more serious than before. That moment is the part they have not forgotten, and it is where the deeper reason begins to reveal itself. There was a moment they almost talked themselves out of everything, and strangely, that is the moment that made their feelings become more serious. Your soulmate had been trying to slow their own mind down, telling themselves that perhaps they were imagining too much, perhaps they were allowing hope to run further than reality, perhaps the safest thing would be to stop thinking about the future and simply let everything remain undefined. For a while, that seemed reasonable. They tried to return to ordinary life. They distracted themselves with familiar routines. They told themselves that if the connection was truly meaningful, they would not need to think about it constantly. But then something small happened. Nothing dramatic. Nothing anyone else would have noticed. They experienced a moment they instinctively wanted to share with you, and before they could stop themselves, your name arrived in their mind. That was when the truth became harder to dismiss. You were no longer simply someone they thought about when they felt lonely, excited, or emotional. You had become someone their mind naturally reached for when life happened. There is an enormous difference between wanting someone's attention and wanting their presence woven into your everyday world. Your soulmate finally recognized that difference. And once they did, something inside them became quieter, not louder. That calm surprised them. They had expected certainty to feel like fireworks. Instead, it felt like sitting alone with one undeniable thought: I could actually build something with this person. Stay till the end, because what happened after that thought explains why marriage began feeling less like a distant dream and more like a direction. They began looking at you differently. Not with less romance, but with more depth. They started noticing the parts of you that would matter years from now. The way you respond when plans change. The way you carry responsibility. The way you protect your peace without becoming cold. The way you can be affectionate without needing constant reassurance. Small things began revealing something larger. Your soulmate realized they were not only falling for moments with you. They were becoming attached to the kind of life your character suggested might be possible beside you. And this is where heaven, in the gentle spiritual sense of this story, revealed something they had not expected to learn. Sometimes the person who feels right does not arrive by making life more dramatic. Sometimes they arrive by making truth easier to recognize. Your soulmate had spent enough time around connections that required endless interpretation. They knew what it felt like to wonder what someone meant, to replay conversations, to search for hidden meanings where directness should have existed. With you, they began craving something different. They wanted clarity. They wanted to speak more plainly. They wanted to stop hiding behind half-sentences and carefully measured emotions. That desire alone frightened them a little, because honesty makes a connection real. Yet it also showed them something important. They did not want to keep you in an indefinite place. They did not want you to become another beautiful possibility that was never given the chance to become something real. Don't skip this part, because their desire to marry you quickly is not simply about romance. It is connected to a deeper realization about timing. Your soulmate has started understanding that the right relationship is not measured only by how many months or years have passed. Time matters. Patience matters, knowing each other matters, but emotional maturity matters too. Two people can know each other for years and never truly see each other. Two people can also begin recognizing important truths surprisingly early and still choose to move carefully. Your soulmate is beginning to understand that wanting commitment does not mean forcing commitment. They can feel strongly and still respect the pace that allows both of you to feel secure. That realization has softened something in them. They no longer want to win your heart. They want to deserve your trust. And there is a memory connected to that shift. One day, you said or did something that showed them you would not abandon yourself just to keep someone close. Perhaps you expressed a boundary. Perhaps you chose patience instead of chasing an answer. Perhaps you simply continued living your life rather than making them the center of it. At first, they did not know why that affected them so much. Later they understood. You were showing them what healthy partnership might actually require: two whole people choosing one another, not two incomplete people asking the other to become everything. That realization changed the meaning of marriage in their mind. For years, marriage may have sounded like a final destination, a promise spoken once and then somehow expected to carry itself. But now they are seeing it differently. They are imagining it as thousands of quiet choices. Listening when it would be easier to defend. Speaking when silence would create distance. Making room for each other's ambitions. Laughing after an exhausting day. repairing misunderstandings before they become walls, celebrating small victories nobody else understands, standing beside one another while still allowing each other to grow. And when they picture those things, you keep appearing naturally in the scene. Not because they have decided you are perfect. In fact, something deeper has happened. They have stopped needing you to be perfect in order to imagine loving you seriously. That may be one of the rarest realizations of all. Infatuation often depends on an idealized version of a person. Mature affection begins when someone sees that another human being will have complicated days, flaws, changing moods, and unfinished places and still feels curious about building something honest with them. Your soulmate is moving toward that kind of understanding. They see more of your humanity now, and somehow their feelings have not become smaller. They have become steadier. Something important is waiting for you here. There was a question they asked themselves privately, and the answer changed everything. They wondered, if nothing about this person became more impressive tomorrow, would I still want them in my life? That question stripped away fantasy. No imagined transformation. No future success required. No perfect version of you waiting somewhere ahead. Just you, as you are still becoming. And the answer they felt was softer than excitement but stronger than impulse. Yes. They still wanted to know you. They still wanted to hear your thoughts. They still wanted to share ordinary days. They still wanted to see where the connection could grow. That answer is part of why marriage entered their minds so quickly. They are not waiting for some extraordinary version of you to appear. They are beginning to appreciate the person already standing in front of them. Yet there is something else they have been carrying, something almost nobody around them knows. Your soulmate has imagined telling someone close to them about you. Perhaps they already have, indirectly. Maybe they mentioned your personality without saying how much you mean. Maybe they described a conversation the two of you shared. Maybe someone noticed the way their expression changed when your name appeared. And then came a question they were not prepared for: do you think this could be serious? Your soulmate may have tried to laugh it away. They may have changed the subject. But internally, the question stayed. Serious. The word followed them. Serious meant the connection would need courage. Serious meant they could no longer protect themselves by pretending they did not care. Serious meant they would have to ask what kind of future they genuinely wanted. And that night, or sometime soon afterward, they began picturing commitment in a way they had never allowed themselves to before. Not a ceremony first. Not a ring. Not an announcement. They imagined what it would feel like to know that the two of you had chosen one another deliberately. That was the image that affected them. Choice. There is something deeply powerful about being wanted, but there is something even more meaningful about being chosen with awareness. Your soulmate does not merely want to feel intensely about you. They want to arrive at a place where both of you can look at the reality of the relationship, the beautiful parts, the uncertain parts, the practical parts, and still say, yes, I want to continue building this. That is the version of marriage they are beginning to desire. And unexpectedly, it has made them more patient, even while their heart feels urgent. This is the paradox they are living inside. Their emotions say, I know what I want. Their wisdom says, treat what you want with care. Those two voices are learning to coexist. They are beginning to understand that loving you seriously means respecting your timing too. If you need clarity, they want to offer clarity. If you need consistency, they know words alone cannot provide it. If you need space to understand your own feelings, commitment cannot be meaningful unless that space exists. Something about you has made them want to become the kind of person capable of building the future they keep imagining. That may be the deeper reason heaven seems to be revealing through this connection. Perhaps the purpose of this feeling is not simply to tell them, marry this person quickly. Perhaps the message is more mature than that, become ready for the kind of love you are asking to receive. Your soulmate is starting to examine themselves. The way they communicate. The way they react when they feel vulnerable. The habits they carry from older experiences. The things they would need to learn if the two of you were ever to share a real life together. And instead of making them run away, those questions are making them lean toward growth. That is significant. Anyone can imagine a beautiful future while remaining exactly the same. But when someone begins asking how they need to grow in order to protect that future, their feelings have entered a different territory. Your soulmate has started seeing commitment not as possession, but responsibility. Not responsibility in a heavy sense, but the beautiful responsibility of caring for something precious without trying to control it. They want to know what makes you feel heard. They want to know what kind of support actually helps you. They want to understand what you need when you become quiet. They want to know how your dreams fit beside their own. These questions would once have felt too serious. Now they feel strangely natural. And there is one reason behind that natural feeling they still cannot fully explain. When they imagine the future with you, they do not feel as though they are disappearing into someone else's life. They feel as though their own life becomes more expansive. Your presence does not erase their individuality in the picture. It adds companionship to it. They can imagine pursuing their own purpose while supporting yours. They can imagine being close without becoming confined. They can imagine two separate stories creating a shared chapter. That image has become deeply important to them. Perhaps your soulmate once feared commitment because they associated it with losing freedom. Maybe they watched relationships where people slowly stopped being themselves. Maybe they promised themselves they would never become trapped inside expectations. But you have awakened another possibility: commitment can be chosen freedom. The freedom to stop pretending. The freedom to be known. The freedom to build something with a person who does not need you to become smaller. That idea is transforming what marriage means to them. Stay a little longer, because one quiet moment pushed this realization even further. They imagined receiving good news someday, something they had worked toward for a long time. Their first instinct was to picture telling you. Then they imagined a difficult day, one where nothing seemed to work. Again, they pictured coming home to you, or simply hearing your voice. Then they imagined an ordinary Sunday years into the future, nothing happening at all. And somehow, you were there too. That was when they realized you had entered every version of their imagination: celebration, difficulty, and ordinary peace. Most attractions survive beautifully inside exciting scenarios. But when someone appears naturally in the mundane parts of the future, the heart begins asking different questions. Your soulmate's heart asked one: what am I waiting for? But the answer was not, rush. The answer was, be honest. That is what they are moving toward. Honesty about how serious their feelings have become. Honesty about the fact that they can imagine marriage. Honesty about the fears that still exist alongside that desire. Because they do have fears. Not fear of you, but the natural uncertainty that comes with wanting something meaningful. What if they say too much too soon? What if you misunderstand their certainty as pressure? What if they reveal how far their imagination has traveled and you are still standing at the beginning? They do not want their feelings to become a weight you have to carry. So they have been holding some of this privately, trying to find the right language. And that may be why you have sensed a strange intensity from them lately. There are sentences behind their silence. There are questions beneath seemingly casual conversations. Sometimes they are not merely asking what you want next month. They are trying to understand what kind of future you imagine. When they ask what matters to you in relationships, they may be listening more carefully than you realize. When they ask where you would like to live one day, or what kind of home feels peaceful to you, or what you think makes love last, those questions may no longer be hypothetical. They are collecting pieces of a possible life. Not because they have already decided everything for both of you, but because their heart is beginning to test whether your visions could belong in the same picture. Don't skip the next truth. There is something they want from you even more than certainty. They want authenticity. If you are unsure, they would rather know your uncertainty than receive an answer you do not mean. If you need time, they would rather wait for something genuine than rush toward something fragile. If you feel the same, they want that feeling to grow through actions, not only beautiful words. This is where their love is becoming more grounded. They are realizing that marriage is not proof that love exists. The relationship built before and after the promise is the proof. And so, even as they imagine choosing you for life, they are beginning to pay closer attention to the present. Are you both able to communicate? Can you laugh together? Can you disagree without trying to hurt each other? Can you create emotional safety? Can dreams coexist? Can apologies be sincere? Can affection survive ordinary days? These are the questions beneath their urgency. And surprisingly, the more seriously they ask them, the more they find themselves drawn toward you. Not because every answer is already perfect, but because they sense willingness. Willingness may be what they value most. Two people do not need to know everything before beginning a future. They need to be willing to learn each other. Your soulmate believes you might be someone they could continue learning for years. That thought moves them deeply. There will always be new versions of you. New dreams. New lessons. New parts of yourself you have not met yet. And instead of seeing that as uncertainty, they are beginning to see it as one of the most beautiful reasons to stay. Imagine loving someone not because you have completely figured them out, but because you remain curious about who they are becoming. That is where your soulmate's feelings are moving. Their desire for marriage is not simply the desire to secure what exists today. It is the desire to witness who you both become tomorrow. And this is where another rare realization entered their heart. They do not only want you beside them when life feels beautiful. They want to become someone whose presence can help beautiful things grow between you. They are thinking about contribution instead of consumption. Not, what can this relationship give me, but what can I bring into this relationship? That question marks a quiet transformation. They want to bring patience, honesty, humor, loyalty, curiosity, space, effort. The qualities they hope to receive from you are becoming qualities they know they must practice themselves. Something important is waiting for you beyond that transformation, because there is still one moment they have not told anyone about. One night, while thinking about the two of you, your soulmate asked themselves a question they had been avoiding from the beginning. It was not, "Do I love this person?" The question was much more revealing. They asked, "If this person truly chose me, am I ready to be chosen?" And suddenly, the story was no longer only about you. It became about everything inside themselves they had been postponing. The conversations they needed to have. The emotional habits they needed to outgrow. The promises they would need to mean. The courage required to let someone see them without the carefully managed version they usually present. That question stayed with them far into the quiet. And when the answer finally began forming, it revealed the deepest reason they want to marry you so quickly, a reason connected not to what they are afraid to lose, but to who they have started becoming since you entered their heart. And that reason is the one they may be closest to finally admitting. The answer came to them in the most unexpected way, not through excitement, not through a perfect conversation, but through the realization that loving you had quietly changed the way they were looking at themselves. Your soulmate had spent so much time asking whether you were the person they could build a future with that they had almost missed the deeper question unfolding underneath it. Who would they need to become if that future truly happened? That thought followed them into an ordinary moment when nothing around them seemed significant. Perhaps they were driving, sitting alone after a long day, or staring at a message they had considered sending you and then erased. Suddenly, they understood something they had never expected to admit. They did not simply want you close because you made them feel loved. They wanted you close because your presence had made them more aware of the kind of love they wanted to give. There is a difference. Wanting affection can be immediate. Wanting to become more patient, more honest, more dependable, more emotionally present for another person reaches somewhere deeper. And that is where the urgency inside them began changing shape. What once felt like, "I want this person now," slowly became, "I do not want to waste the opportunity to build something meaningful with this person." Don't skip this realization, because it explains why their thoughts about marriage have become so persistent without needing to become reckless. They are beginning to understand that commitment is not about reaching the finish line quickly. It is about recognizing when something deserves your full attention. And you have their attention in a way very few things have before. Not because every conversation between you has been perfect. Not because they have never felt confused. But because even their uncertainty keeps leading them back toward honesty instead of away from you. They have started noticing that when something feels unresolved between the two of you, their first instinct is no longer to disappear emotionally. They want to understand. They want to repair. They want to ask instead of assume. That desire means more than they first realized. There was a time when distance may have felt easier to them. Silence protected them from difficult conversations. Indifference protected them from disappointment. Keeping their feelings slightly hidden allowed them to remain in control. But you have made control feel less important than connection. Something about you has made them wonder whether vulnerability might be worth the risk of being truly known. And that question has reached a place inside them they rarely allow anyone to touch. They are beginning to see that the future they imagine with you will require more than chemistry. It will require emotional courage. The courage to say, "That hurt me," instead of pretending nothing happened. The courage to say, "I need you," without believing that needing someone makes them weak. The courage to hear your truth without immediately turning it into a defense of their own behavior. These are not the glamorous images people usually associate with marriage, yet they are the very images beginning to convince your soulmate that they want one with you. They are picturing a relationship where honesty does not end affection. Where misunderstandings become conversations instead of endings. Where two people can sit across from each other after a difficult moment and still remember that they are on the same side. Something important is waiting for you inside that vision, because your soulmate has begun comparing this possibility with the version of love they once believed they wanted. In the past, they may have thought love needed constant intensity to remain alive. They may have been attracted to uncertainty because uncertainty created anticipation. They may have mistaken emotional distance for mystery. Yet now they are discovering that there is another kind of depth, the depth of knowing someone is still there after the exciting moment passes. The depth of hearing the same laugh hundreds of times and still smiling when it fills the room. The depth of sharing a silence that does not need to be rescued. You have become connected to that kind of image in their mind. And perhaps that is why their desire feels so fast. They spent a long time searching for feelings that were loud enough to convince them. You introduced them to something quieter that did not need convincing. One night, a simple thought came to them: what if I have been looking for a feeling when I should have been looking for a person? That question stopped them. They began remembering the qualities they once placed at the top of their list. Excitement. Attraction. Mystery. Spark. Those things still mattered, but suddenly another set of qualities began moving higher: kindness when nobody was watching, emotional steadiness, curiosity, respect, humor during ordinary days, the ability to make room for another human being without trying to own them. And there you were, appearing again inside that list without ever asking to be there. Your soulmate began realizing that the traits they value most in you are the traits that survive time. That realization made marriage feel less like a romantic fantasy and more like something worth considering seriously. Stay with this moment, because the next piece surprised them even more. They started imagining who they would become beside you 5 years from now. Not what the house would look like. Not where the two of you might travel. Not what other people would think. They imagined themselves. Would they still feel free to laugh the same way? Would they still pursue the things that matter to them? Would they become more thoughtful, more open, more emotionally mature? The answer their imagination kept offering was not certainty, but possibility. A beautiful possibility. They could picture being encouraged rather than diminished. They could picture learning from you without feeling threatened by your strengths. They could picture being challenged without feeling rejected. And perhaps for the first time, marriage began representing expansion instead of limitation. Your soulmate does not want a relationship where two lives become smaller to fit inside one another. They are imagining two lives becoming richer because each person brings something real into the shared space. That is why your independence matters to them more than you may know. The things you care about outside this connection, the work you want to do, the people you love, the dreams you protect, the quiet routines that make you feel like yourself, those things do not make them feel less important. They are beginning to understand that those things are part of the person they fell for. They do not want to remove them. They want to understand how to stand beside them. And this is where a deeper layer of their urgency becomes visible. Your soulmate has seen enough of life to know that meaningful connections are not guaranteed simply because someone wants one. People can miss each other through poor timing, pride, silence, or the assumption that there will always be another opportunity to speak. They do not want that awareness to turn into pressure. Instead, it is becoming a reason to be more intentional. They are starting to ask themselves what they would regret leaving unsaid. Not dramatic declarations. Simple truths. I respect you. I think about a future with you. You matter more to me than I have admitted. I want to know whether we could build something real. Those sentences have begun forming inside them, even if they have not reached you yet. Something important is waiting for you, because one of those truths is more vulnerable than all the others. Your soulmate has realized they are not only hoping you will choose them. They are hoping you will understand them. That may sound simple, but for this person it carries enormous emotional weight. Being desired can happen without being known. Being admired can happen from a distance. Being understood requires someone to see the contradictions, the confident parts and the uncertain parts, the ambition and the exhaustion, the courage and the hesitation, and remain curious instead of disappointed. They have started wondering whether you could be that person. Perhaps they have already felt glimpses of it. A moment when you noticed they were quieter than usual and did not force them to explain. A moment when you understood the meaning behind something they could not fully articulate. A moment when you laughed at exactly the thing they thought nobody else would find funny. Those tiny recognitions accumulated. And one day they realized that being around you sometimes feels like being translated correctly. That feeling is rare. It may be one of the reasons they keep imagining marriage before they plan to. But here is where their heart became even more careful. They do not want to make you responsible for healing every unfinished part of them. They are beginning to understand that love cannot be a place where one person hands the other all their unprocessed history and says, "Fix this for me." If they truly want to build with you, they know they must bring self-awareness into that future. They must be willing to look at the habits that could damage the very connection they value. That realization led them into one of the most meaningful private conversations they have had with themselves. They asked, "What would I need to stop doing if I wanted this love to last?" The answers were uncomfortable, but important. Stop assuming silence will solve what needs to be spoken. Stop expecting another person to guess feelings that were never expressed. Stop protecting pride at the cost of connection. Stop treating vulnerability as something to avoid. Stop delaying honest conversations because the timing never feels perfect. This was not about becoming flawless for you. It was about recognizing that love worth keeping deserves effort worth giving. And slowly, they began wanting to make those changes for themselves too. That may be the most beautiful part of what has happened. You did not arrive as a project they needed to complete. You became a mirror showing them that the kind of relationship they desire requires them to participate differently. They started realizing that maturity in love is not finding someone who never triggers uncertainty. It is learning how to respond to uncertainty without destroying closeness. They want to practice that with you. They want to learn your language, not in the literal sense, but the emotional one. What makes you feel appreciated? What makes you withdraw? What kind of reassurance feels genuine to you? What kind feels excessive? How do you handle conflict? What makes you feel close again afterward? Your soulmate has begun caring about these details because they are no longer imagining you only as someone to date. They are imagining you as someone to understand over time. Don't skip the next part, because this is where the hidden reason becomes almost visible. There was one specific future image that affected them more deeply than any thought of a wedding. They imagined growing older beside you. Not dramatically. They simply pictured the two of you years from now, sitting somewhere familiar, carrying memories nobody else fully understood. They imagined looking at you and knowing that both of you had changed since the beginning, yet had continued choosing to know the new versions of each other. The image was so ordinary that it surprised them. There were no crowds. No perfect lighting. No grand celebration. Just familiarity. History. Two people who had witnessed each other's becoming. And that image reached them more deeply than the idea of being newly in love ever had. They realized they do not only want the beginning with you. They want the middle. They want the parts nobody posts about. The seasons when dreams change. The strange jokes that develop after years together. The small rituals that become sacred because only the two of you know why they matter. They want to remember what you were like when you first met and then watch you become someone neither of you could have predicted. This is why marriage has begun feeling urgent in their heart, not because they believe life must be rushed, but because for the first time they are craving continuity. They want a story long enough to contain change. They want the chance to look back someday and say, "We were there for all of it." Yet even this realization was not the deepest one. Something else happened when they considered the possibility that you might not choose the same future. Instead of becoming angry or possessive, they felt something more mature. Sadness, perhaps, but also respect. They realized they would rather hear your honest answer than receive a commitment born from pressure. This taught them something important about their own feelings. They do not want to possess you. They want to be chosen by you freely. That distinction matters. A healthy future cannot be built on someone saying yes because they are afraid to disappoint. Your soulmate wants your yes to be a real yes, if it ever comes. They want you to look at them with the same clarity they are trying to bring to you. That means they must be willing to show you who they are rather than performing whatever version they think would guarantee your affection. And this may be one of the most vulnerable shifts happening inside them right now. They are becoming less interested in impressing you and more interested in being honest with you. They want you to know what they are good at and where they are still growing. They want you to know their dreams without turning those dreams into promises they cannot keep. They want to talk about practical realities, not only romantic possibilities. Because the more seriously they imagine marriage, the more they understand that love must eventually meet real life. Schedules. Responsibilities. Family dynamics. Different habits. Personal goals. Decisions neither person can predict yet. Rather than destroying the romance, those realities are making the idea feel more meaningful. Anyone can love an imagined future. Your soulmate is beginning to ask whether the two of you could love each other inside an actual one. There is quiet courage in that question. They are no longer asking whether everything will always be easy. They are asking whether both of you could remain willing when it is not. Could you choose curiosity during disagreement? Could you protect each other's dignity even while frustrated? Could you celebrate each other's growth without interpreting growth as distance? Could you admit when you are wrong? Could you forgive ordinary human mistakes while still keeping healthy boundaries? These questions have not frightened them away. They have made them more serious. And that seriousness is becoming visible in subtle ways. They may listen differently when you speak about your future now. They may remember things they once would have forgotten. They may ask follow-up questions because they are not simply hearing your words, they are trying to understand the life behind them. Perhaps you mentioned somewhere you have always wanted to visit, something you hope to accomplish, a tradition you loved growing up, or a kind of home atmosphere that makes you feel peaceful. Those details stay with them. Their mind is quietly asking, could I help create space for that? Notice the difference. They are not asking, how do I make this person fit into my life? They are asking, what would a shared life need to make room for both of us? That is the beginning of partnership. And there is another private shift they have not fully named. Your soulmate has started caring less about appearing emotionally unaffected. There may have been a time when they believed whoever cared less had more power. Maybe life taught them to protect themselves by never revealing the full depth of what they felt.